I want to say thank you very much to Elsevier for inviting us out to the Pure Conference, the Pure International Conference today. Again, my name is Khazzam. I'm project director of research with New Jersey. I work for the Economic Development Authority. And we're very excited to share with you the work we've done so far in building this community. I think this would count as a pure community portal in the truest sense, because we have many institutions on this portal. But I also have an ulterior motive here today. I also have another objective, which is to sort of inspire you about this idea of collaborative innovation. I think this is maybe one of these new paradigms that we're living through right now at this moment in history. And my first goal is to sort of immerse you in that and then talk a little bit about our project specifically. So let's talk a little bit about old-fashioned innovation versus the newer collaborative innovation. And here might require some of your imagination. So going back maybe 40 years ago from now, I would have been in grade school. I would have been the 1970s. And we would have been learning about inventors and inventions and all of the excitement about that, how much money you could make someday, become a millionaire, change the world. And this is how we learned invention would likely be. Remember the romance of the laboratory tinkerers. I was just in the Wright brothers workshop this summer when I took my family down to Carolina, New Jersey, Thomas Edison, Philadelphia. Of course, we have Ben Franklin, and of course, Alexander Graham Bell, and so forth. I mean, these are the heroes that we learned about from history. Maybe some of you would recognize these more modern garage inventors, of course, Gates and Steve Jobs, and I believe that's Jeff Bezos in his original setup for Amazon. So let's talk a little bit about this historical perspective, because I think it's important for us to try and get our mindset out of this perspective. And I think then we can talk a little bit more about what we're doing in New Jersey. There was once upon a time where you had a lone inventor. And that lone inventor, they built their products in a small place, a small garage, or maybe you were wealthy and you had a mansion like that one in Tuxedo Park where radar was developed. But in any case, you were really on your own in a garage or a small house. You generally had all the tools and materials at your disposal. You didn't have to go to any other place to get them. Your workshop was probably equipped with all that you needed. If you were in Edison's time, you would have even benefited from the Industrial Revolution with interchangeable parts and tools, so it would not have been too difficult to acquire the components that you would have needed to make invention. Mainly, there were many mechanical innovations at the time. You kind of worked in secret, or you worked in isolation. I mean, even Edison was very paranoid about what his workers could do and say. And I think the lone inventor was very much a secretive inventor. And I should say, if you read a lot of comic books like I did at the time, you might have also read about places like the Batcave, and many of our superheroes had some kinds of labs like this. All just sort of reinforces the culture that innovation was a singular thing, an individual thing. And as you may not know, today, where disruption is something that people just worship, the idea of disruption. We call ourselves disruptors today, but disruption was not welcome. 100 years ago, 150 years ago. If you ever heard the stories about the first cars on the road, they were seen as a terrible hazard and distraction for the horses. And in the early days, consumers resented these things. So many of the things that we would consider today to be almost revolutionary in terms of their capacity to change society were really not welcome in the beginning. Finally, I think there's an idea of the lone inventor being sort of a Renaissance character. You often hear about Thomas Jefferson and how Thomas Jefferson, as you know, was actually an inventor, also a politician, but also an inventor. And it was said that by the time Jefferson was doing his inventions in the early 1800s, that was about the last time in history that anybody could have had access to and understanding of the full scope of scientific disciplines and knowledge. After that point, no one person could possibly have a handle on everything. And of course, back in those days, inventions were seen as novelties, and many people would say things like, this would never work, I can't believe it, and then boom, lo and behold, it works. So since the New Jersey project, the research with New Jersey, is really focused on STEM, a lot of those traditional old-fashioned industries where innovation was taking place would be examples like here: electricity, electromagnetism, mechanical appliances and tools, automobiles, aircraft, telephone, telegraph equipment, and much later on, of course, the computers, early computers, they were working really with the parts of the computers and software to invent. These are some of the earliest examples of what I would say the lone inventor's realm. But today, it's a little bit different. As you know, that we still live in a society where those types of inventions can happen and that spirit can prevail. But I think it's more important that we start thinking about a newer paradigm of invention, and that's where I would get to collaborative innovation. Now, these are some of the STEM disciplines that might be associated with this paradigm: biotechnology, genetic engineering, pharmaceuticals, robotics, aerospace industry, advanced chemicals and synthetics, agri-tech, food processing, all forms of alternative forms of energy, environmental engineering, and so forth. I think you can understand how many of these types of innovations and inventions are not likely to happen in somebody's living room. I think you need a lot more space and equipment for that. So now we're just going to briefly look at the idea of the collaborative inventor. And the very first thing I can assure you of is that this is needed today because we live in a much more complex society than we did 100 years ago. Society is much more complex in terms of the number of scientific disciplines that are available, the length of time different experts have to spend to master their disciplines. The complexity of technology is enormous. One instrument like this laptop over here has numerous different types of technologies in there. And also, the economy is far more complex today than it was back then. Markets are different today. Markets are far more complex. Consumers are far more complex. Even the regulatory structure is far more complex. You simply can't just go to your garage, create something, and the next day put it on Amazon. There are a lot of obstacles. And we know from those STEM industries that I talked about that collaborative inventors do not have access to a lot of the costly tools and materials and sterile environments that they're going to need to make their research. That they're going to need to work with places like universities who have these materials, who have these labs, and most importantly, have the specialized experts there. And as I said, today is disruption is welcomed. It's prized by many. But if I was an investor and I was looking to invest in a new product or service, or if someone had a business model, one of the questions I might ask is I would try to find out about the legitimacy of whoever that person or whoever that business is working with to do their research. So it would be helpful for me as an investor to know that, okay, this small startup is working with Princeton University or working with Rowan University, and there's a way I can go and find out information about those universities and who those experts are that this company or this individual is working with, to make sure that this isn't just a disruption, a wonderful form of disruption, but there's something legitimate to it. I don't know how many of you remember living through the late 1990s and 2000s when we had a lot of wonderful ideas for the internet, but they really weren't well thought out, and therefore we had a bit of an economic collapse due to that dot-bomb era that many of us have lived through. So it's important to be able to know who we're working with, and I think today, much like the opposite of yesterday, novelty is taken for granted. As I said, once upon a time, people looked at novelties like the first automobiles or the first mechanical devices, telephones, and they were mesmerized by it. But I think today, if you talk to your small child, I have an 11-year-old, nothing phases him. I mean, nothing. He's spoiled by the fact that he's seen it all on his computer, done it all, witnessed it all. Nothing is mind-blowing anymore. So there's a sort of, I think people take for granted innovation today. So if there was one slide that was the most important slide in my presentation today, it would really be this slide, because I spent 4 years of my professional life before coming to the state government in the accounting industry. And much of what I was researching there was the idea of different types of capitals. As you may be familiar with in the finance industry, or if you're an accountant, you'd be focused on financial capital. And you'd be focusing on the books, the bottom line, the numbers. Oops. Okay. But there are other forms of capital today in this very complex society that we live in. These other forms of capital are manufacturing capital, intellectual capital, social capital, cultural capital, and even political capital. And how to evaluate these different forms of capital and how to find ways to put them together, to make them relate to one another, is a very big challenge today. And I'm going to get into that because I think that's one of the things that a pure database or a pure collaborative community should really be doing. It should be putting different forms of capital together so that each sort of silo understands the value of what's in the silo next to it. In the state of New Jersey, there are many instances where businesses are right next door to the universities or right next door to one another, and they have no idea of what's sitting right next to them. So now I'm going to get to Research with New Jersey. Research with New Jersey is an example of a regional model of collaborative innovation. And you hear all these different things. Some of them are, like we hear the innovation ecosystem. I've heard that one. There's many different names for it, but really what it's all about is institutions in some sort of formal arrangement that work together. And that's what Research with New Jersey is. There are 3 things that you need to do this in your own region, in your own backyard. One of them is people and relationships. And I believe it was Tony who stood here before and said that, well, email is really bad. It's a bad way to meet people. And that couldn't be more true. I think Research with New Jersey is built on people and relationships before anything else. It meant getting on the phone. It meant meeting people. It meant going out to the universities, sitting down with them, talking to them, using PowerPoints like this to make relationships and to talk. You can't explain the value of these things in just an email. And of course, you also need public policy. Being that I'm from a government entity, the government has an important convening power. And wherever you are, in whatever state you're in, whatever country you're in, it really should be the government's role to convene institutions for projects like this, because governments can say, like in the state of New Jersey, we have a problem in our economy. We need to solve this problem. We need to increase the number of STEM organizations, STEM businesses coming into the state because we want new products and services here. We want new jobs here. We want a whole new industrial base here. That's the problem. And we can support that problem with policies. And Research with New Jersey is just one of several policies. The last thing that you need is tools, and that's what Pure is. Pure is a tool. It's a tool being used for policy. We have some things in New Jersey that we'd like to highlight, and I think that many of you in the room are probably from economies that suffer from the same challenges that New Jersey has. New Jersey is one of the most mature economies in the United States. So why is that? We've been around since 1600. So you could look at companies here in the states here in the East Coast, like New York and Pennsylvania, and what you'll see is that most of these states have already gone through the full cycles of economic development. They started off agrarian, they were merchant economies, they were industrialized economies, and then as the industries fell off and went south, they were post-industrialized economies, then they became service economies, like we are now, where a majority of our industry is service industries. And we have a very highly educated workforce here in New Jersey, and we don't want to lose that workforce. We don't want that workforce to be going to other places. We also have a world-class infrastructure, and as you can see, we have highways, railways, 3 big airports, And you know, one of the things you may know about New Jersey is certainly many people pass through New Jersey. They don't necessarily stay in New Jersey, but certainly all roads lead through. Maybe not to, but they lead through New Jersey. But this is a very important asset for us. We have a lot of older industrial cities, and that's very important because we have the real estate and the infrastructure in these cities. Many of them now are very run down, but they're being revitalized. And the spaces in these cities are actually ideal for inventors, for small companies, for new manufacturers to set up in. And you know, if you look at places like Paterson and Newark and Camden, which is right across the river, if you dare to go there, it's you know, these cities have the warehouses and the you know, the spaces that you can actually, that's very appealing for a lot of young entrepreneurs and a lot of new businesses. And some of them are actually in the empowerment zone, so there's other benefits. And of course, finally, there's a lot of consumers here in New Jersey. I mean, I know that this quote here is 22 million consumers. I don't know how up to date that quote is, but I do know that we have a huge population here in New Jersey with a lot of expendable money, and we should be able to purchase a lot of these new goods and services that we hope to create. Research with New Jersey was the result of a recommendation made from this particular policy paper, which advised that, back in 2010, I believe, which advised our governor at the time that we have to attract large STEM corporations. We're losing them to places like Massachusetts, to places like Silicon Valley, and we're hemorrhaging them away, and we couldn't understand why. We also noticed that there are other parts of the country that do a very good job at branding themselves. You know, when I got off the plane at the UIDP conference, actually, in fact, in Silicon Valley, and I felt like I was in a really happy place. You know, everyone was young, and you know, it was Silicon Valley. It was you don't feel that way when you get off the plane in New Jersey. You know, there's no brand in New Jersey that says this is where innovation's going to happen, and this is a cool place, and you know. But they've done a very good job. The Research Triangle in North Carolina and in Massachusetts, they've done a very good job at making it known that those states are very much into research and innovation. So New Jersey wants to do that too. That's another thing that we would like to do. And again, New Jersey has a lot of industries that need to change. When politicians tell you things like, well, we're going to bring the jobs back. We're going to bring jobs back. Don't worry, these jobs left, but we're bringing them back. The truth is those jobs don't really exist anymore. Those jobs in manufacturing, those jobs even in industries like automotive, you know, much of those jobs simply don't exist. We need to create new industries and new jobs and new disciplines, and that's a much bigger challenge. So we have a big job ahead of us in New Jersey if we want to create that kind of economy. And finally, what we noticed in this study that was done is that there's too many barriers between the different institutions. Businesses weren't aware of what was going on in universities. Universities weren't aware of what was going on in business. Neither businesses nor universities knew what the economic development was doing or what its plans were. So there was really a need to break through those silos. So how do we envision that Research with New Jersey will foster economic development? Well, first and foremost, we want this database, we want this program to enable collaboration between businesses, university, and government. Those three things, that tripod. We also want to create an ecosystem for innovation by facilitating joint research to create new products, new services, new businesses, and new industries. We want to raise the profile of the state's universities nationally and globally, and we think that a database like the one we're building will help do that. You know, of course, we know in some cases what Rutgers University is or Rowan University is. We live here, but do others overseas know about it? Do others in other parts of the country know about it? This will help. And again, going back to what I said, we need to connect the capitals. That's very, very important. And we'd like to, of course, promote our own STEM advancements if we possibly can in the state as well. So, again, I realize I might be preaching to the choir here, but you may ask, So what research assets are featured on researchwithnewjersey.com? Well, being that you're all Pure users and you know the Pure system quite well, I don't think I have to get into too much depth here. But first and foremost, faculty bios and expert profiles. I mean, I would think that's a form of intellectual capital, people. I would also consider it a form of social capital. Information about the university programs, departments, and specializations. You may know that as research units when you use the database. That's extremely important because, you know, for example, I was at Rutgers not long ago and serving on a task force where some of the biotech industries on this task force made it quite clear that they're looking to the universities to help them create curriculum. It's not just about, this database isn't just about entrepreneurs or businesses finding partners in research. It's also about big businesses in the state that already have big workforces that need to either be retooled for new technology or trained in very specific areas of what they're doing. So for example, at this task force, somebody had mentioned to us that Rutgers was looking for their biotech people to somehow learn the skills of sales and marketing as it pertains very specifically to biotech fields. So that's a real sort of a very specialized thing. Now, the universities can do a very good job at facilitating that and being partners in that. So I think that kind of collaboration is also very important. Publications and abstracts. Well, we all know that that's very important. I don't know, and realistically speaking, how an entrepreneur or a young, or a new business or something might, what kind of an appetite they might have to go on and learn about publications. I think that they would be more likely wanting to meet faculty and meet people. But I think that the publications, of course, plays a very important role in educating anybody who's planning a business, wants to know about the technology, wants to know about methodologies or anything associated with that. Those publications would be useful. Our database will have information on equipment and laboratory technology at the universities. A very big challenge, because many of the universities that we work with, have yet to really put those, to really archive all of the latest and greatest technology that they have in one place. And that's what they're working on for us now in phase 2 of our project, trying to get a really good list together of all the wonderful things that they do have that are available for, sharing and for, working with others outside the university. Funding awards and grants, so that would be, I would consider financial capital, intellectual property, events and conferences. I mean, even events about, even examples that somebody could learn about what's going on, a conference or a speaking engagement, a roundtable. I think that would be very useful for any individual who's, seeking to a partnership or to be involved in some sort of a STEM initiative, that they might want to attend those things. Here is our partner page, and I don't recall myself putting this special effect in, but it's important that I sort of go through the partners here. We established a formal governance board. We felt that was a very important step in building Research New Jersey. We didn't just want to build a database. We wanted to sort of make sure that all of our institutions were sort of together in a formal structure where decisions could be made and ideas could be discussed. One part of this structure is the facilitating institutions. That would be my own, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the Office of the Secretary of Higher Education, and of course Elsevier. They are really the facilitating institutions of this initiative. Then you have the research universities, and there's 6 of them. We started with 5, and we added Montclair just recently as they officially became a research university. They're not yet up on the portal, but they will be in a few months. So we have the 6 universities: Princeton University, NJIT, that's the New Jersey Institute of Technology, Rowan University, Rutgers University, Stevens Institute of Technology, and now Montclair State. So we have 6 universities. But we also felt that in a formal governance structure, we wanted to include business and industry groups. That was very important because the business and industry groups can actually do much to help us promote this project. They can get us in front of potential user groups to let us do demos, to let us show them how to use the database, because they're really the ones on the front lines. They're the ones fielding the questions from businesses coming into the state. You know, how do I find out about this? How do I find an expert on nanotechnology? Or, you know, here's where I'm located. I'm located right near Rutgers. Who can I talk to about this particular, you know, let's say very specific field of science? So we have the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. That's more for manufacturers. We have, of course, BioNJ for the biotechnology industry. We have Hinge, the Healthcare Institute of New Jersey. Choose New Jersey, and Choose New Jersey's job is basically to make sure companies choose New Jersey by reaching out. They get, you know, they field calls from all around the world from companies seeking to relocate. Choose New Jersey is really the front lines. We have the R&D Council of New Jersey, and of course the New Jersey Tech Council. So this is really our whole our board, and the board, that's our, you know, our advisory board. And we then have two smaller structures underneath the board. One is a technical committee, and one is a communications committee. The technical committee's job is to basically bring together all of the IT, HR, data owners for the libraries in the universities, so that they can actually implement Pure and actually upload their information and overcome any challenges that they might have in the implementation. The technical team works that way. And we have a communications committee, which is very, very important, and that consists of marketing experts, communications experts from the universities and from the state and from the business and industry groups to help us coordinate how to promote it. So if there's an event coming up at NJBIA, someone like me will be invited to speak. Or if Princeton has an event, they'll invite us to come, and vice versa. They're helping us promote it. This is, of course, what you saw from the keynote presentation. This is the homepage of Research with New Jersey. We branded it, and the way we branded it is the 6 universities that are in the Research with New Jersey project, they have their own Research with logo. Research with Princeton, Research with Rutgers, and it's quite similar. We tried to create some continuity between us and the actual universities. We hope to have more than just the 4 things you see on top there: profiles, research units, research output, and press media. We're hoping to eventually, after phase 2, have equipment and have funds and grants and IP and anything else we can add. But of course, not every university works the same way. And the challenge in working with the universities is trying to have some uniformity. You know, some uniformity in terms of the amount of information they're going to put up, the formatting of the information. So we don't want this sort of asymmetry in the database where, you know, someone will say, well, you know, that's a research unit at Princeton, but that center is at the same level in the hierarchy as a division or school at Rutgers University. We had to solve those problems, and we still will have challenges like that in the future. This is, as you know, you all must be familiar in this room with Elsevier's mapping capability, the capability of being able to show you who's connected to who. You know, it's funny, I use this slide because I remember a number of years ago I was in a seminar in my old job, and we learned about social capital. Social capital. What is social capital? Well, they said the social capital is, you know, you go on LinkedIn, it's number of hits, it's a number of, you know, number of likes, number of reshares, and, you know, that just never was enough for me. You know, I think this is an example of social capital, where you can see who's worked with who's been connected to who, and who's done work where. This is very important because I think that anybody who's, let's say, wanting to come to New Jersey. We had an instance where some companies in Israel were interested in coming here, and this type of diagram let us show them that already there's a lot of joint research happening between New Jersey universities and Israeli universities. So there's nothing new here. We were trying to explain to them, like, look, there's already a lot of discourse between your scholars and our scholars, and here's where it's happening among these different universities and these different researchers. And I think that's a great example of social capital. You're already demonstrating relationships. You may ask the question, so, sounds nice, how are you going to measure it? As you know, the state is, when the state gives money out for things like this, they're pretty strict about how are you going to show us that this actually worked? What metrics will you use? How will you evaluate its performance? We have four different dimensions to how we're going to do that. And hopefully, because research with New Jersey is very new, in a year or two from now, I could come back here and maybe tell you the happy ending of how it all worked. The first dimension is really, the database can really be measured by its inventory, by the depth and scope of content that you have in it. So I think that a successful database will show that more and more content is coming into it. There's more profiles coming into it. There's more publications coming into it. This is a sign that the database is active. It's active by its owners. The owners are putting more into it. That's one metric, but not the only. The next metric would be user experience. And of course, you know, if any of you have been in the corporate world, you've seen how this thing works in so many bad ways, where someone says, oh, Google Analytics, that's just going to tell me everything. Well, Google Analytics is really like user experience. It shows who's coming to the website, how long are they staying there, what pages are they on, what are they doing, what's the bounce rate, these types of things. That really doesn't tell you much of a story, but it does tell you some of the story. So that is part of our dimension of measuring metrics. Then, of course, there's public awareness and marketing, maybe the least important metric, but what that one shows is much of what we talked about a second ago, social media. You know, if a story about the database or some sort of collaboration effort in the database made it into LinkedIn and it got 150 hits, we'd be delighted, and we would note that in our plan and say, well, this is great. You know, there's a lot of social media attached to it. Someone retweeted this, you know, wonderful. All that helps. But really, the last category, that's the most important, policy outcomes. And this is really qualitative data, not easy to get. What I'm saying here is, this is the narrative part. We have to get case studies. We have to show that relationships really were made because of the database, that, you know, people actually came together, made businesses and the universities and did joint research, that maybe did joint projects, did something together as a result of the database. And the only way we can get that information is through user groups. And that's what we're trying to set up right now, our own user groups within each of the New Jersey industries, like biotech and so forth, with the hopes that they can tell us that story. I apologize, you know, I've had this problem since PowerPoint came out many years ago. Been beaten over the head 1,000 times by marketing teams and marketing departments. Yeah, it's a little bit too small, but I tried to put some examples for you of what we would like to see this database generate. There's the example of up there, the tech incubators, you know, universities creating incubators where they could have businesses there. I'm sorry, I can't even read my own, I'm so far back here, it's difficult for me to read my own writing, but these are basically just some examples here that I put. The Stevens University and Hackensack University Medical Center partnering for biomedical education programs for undergraduate students. This is exactly an example of what I was talking about before, about Rutgers. And I'm really reaching the end. I still got some time. No, it's good, it's good. I'm still, I'm almost done. I like this program at Rutgers, where researchers were working with hops farmers across the state in a 2-year program funded by a grant from the USDA. And what they were doing is they were looking to identify best practices for growing and analyzing crops to better serve the growing number of microbreweries in the state. Now, when you see something like that, you may sort of giggle at first and say, oh, great, you're helping the beer industry in New Jersey. But really, that's only the kind of thing that you could do with a business and a university. The university just has resources, ideas that any businessman isn't likely going to have. So when you see projects like that, I get very excited about them, because that's the kind of stuff that we're really hoping is going to happen. I'm sure there'll be a lot of examples of small companies coming here that just aren't going to be aware of what research assets are. I'll close by giving you one example that really hits home for me. My father came here in the 1950s. He was a first generation. Again, it's a story you've heard 1,000 times. He has no money in his pocket, and he winds up starting a factory in downtown Newark, a plastics injection molding factory. Well, that couldn't be more state-of-the-art STEM at that time in 1960 than you could possibly get. But my father, he was a loner. He didn't really speak the language well. The factory was, by itself, it was successful. But if only my father had something like this, where he could say, oh, NJIT is only 2 miles down the road, and maybe I could partner, maybe I could call NJIT. Maybe they can provide some interns or students to help me build my business, or they could tell me about new materials and new products, or come here and guide me for best practices, or maybe I could help them design a program or a curriculum, or maybe I can use some of their equipment, to facilitate the creation of products and things that I'd like to think about. The point is, he was in sort of a silo, as I think many small businesses are today. And you only wonder what could happen, what businesses could be like if they learned more about collaboration. And this is something we have to socialize. This is a long process, but we have to communicate this to people. So I'm hoping that you'll go home, wherever that is, and you'll think about these things. How can industries and institutions partner? And you can use Pure as a way to do that, because it's an excellent platform for that. Thank you. I don't know if anybody had any questions. I'm happy to take them.
We have 6 minutes for questions, so please use the time.
Okay, got one there.
Oh, thank you. So I think it's fascinating that you've been able to, in such a short time frame as described, be able to pull this all together, and with different universities and different types of institutions. Those of us who are from a university, oftentimes we have a hard time corralling the cats just within our own institution, and getting agreement on certain things. So I wonder if you could speak a bit about some of the kinds of issues that you ran into in getting agreement, and then how you were able to push through in order to get consensus and be able to move forward.
Sure, and this is why I think government's so important in this equation, because what we had is the Secretary of Higher Education who was getting on the phone and calling the deans, the presidents of these colleges, and saying, we need you to do this. We really need you to do this. And I think that really, really helped. That's like I say, politics is a convening power, and that's how it can be best used. We did have problems in the sense that the universities were very skeptical about investment, about putting their resources into this. And there were several sell points. One is, of course, the universities got their own Pure platform, which is a great thing. That's their own Pure platform that's not within the state portal. They also got to be part of what I think would be very useful to them, in that they're part of this big portal now, this big community, which is going to get them a lot of press and a lot of attention. But, yeah, it's hard. They had their own, our universities are big and small. So I think, there's always challenges but we have them at the table together, working very well now, so well, that I would think that even if research with New Jersey was to not last forever, this is one consortium that you'd want to keep together once you build it.
Eli, thanks. Question, it seems to me like obviously this is a pull technology. Have you thought about trying to create a list where people could, like a listserv where people could get information pushed to them from companies who might be interested in getting updates? Is that something that, have you given that some thought to? Because this does, there's a barrier of activation. You have to say to yourself, hey, I should go to the, Research in New Jersey portal, whereas if there was a list where people could sign up and maybe get like a monthly newsletter or an update. I don't know if you've thought about that.
We are thinking about that. In fact, and it's a great idea. We are thinking about something like that. See, we think that if we can just get people to join, like a community of members where they can be part of the database, then as members we can push information out to them, And one of the things we're thinking that newsletter would be is, I know somebody right now who's writing these beautiful tech briefs right now in the state of New Jersey about very specific industries. And I'm thinking, we're thinking about inviting her, and I think it's coming from NJIT, to join forces with us, because those things would help drive, I think, a lot of interest in the database as well. But I think you're right. There's an unlimited amount of effort that will be needed to make this community work. Well, happy Halloween. Oh, so back there.
Quick question. How did you go about picking your business partners that you included in the network?
The business and industry groups were already very close to the Economic Development Authority, and they were already involved with many other projects with our organization. So getting them involved was very easy. In fact, it would almost be assumed that they would be. That's often what happens, with organizations. They already have their partners and their stakeholders, and that was the easy part.
How would you go about, inviting new partners to participate? Or what's the strategy, right now that you have to do that?
I would like to add more partners. I think the thing that we're trying to do is trying to figure out who's not represented on that list and who is not represented that's very significant. So whereas we have things like biotech and pharmaceuticals and those bases, those typical New Jersey bases covered, I'm trying to figure out what other industries are out there that I really don't know much about that maybe we should invite. So that's kind of where we are right now. I know advanced chemicals, that we really don't have that covered. There is a small defense industry coming into New Jersey. That might be interesting. There's a whole lot of small little robotics companies and artificial intelligence. Whether or not we have a economy of scale for that yet, but those are the types of companies I'd like to try to get up and coming. But where there's a scale, a big enough group.
In terms of involving these industries, do you see them putting any information into Pure Portal as well? Or is this university presenting their information for industry to search?
I have this big dream. I'm going to tell you about it. I think, personally speaking, that the way to go from here is to open the database up to private industry, because many private companies have already expressed to us that they want to be on this database. They have research assets, they have experts, they have everything that much of which the university has. The challenge that I have with that is to try to make sure that the universities are comfortable with it, because the universities, their academic information and their research is likely of a higher grade, a much higher grade of discipline, and I wouldn't want to mix university information with corporate research without there being some sort of clear demarcation in the database that shows this is a university publication and this is a publication from, say, Merck. I think, but we would need to do that because I think it would help subsidize the database, and I think that there would be a lot of dialogue anyway.